Welcome to Legal Nurse Podcast. I'm Pat Iyer, and this is our 9th year of producing shows for legal nurse consultants that are heard all around the world. I'm delighted that you're with us today for this session and for all of the future sessions that we have for this show. Coming up in our next LNC Success online conference, taking place February 27, 28, and March 1, 2025, you will have an opportunity to get support, to get knowledge, to have networking experiences, and to refresh your business. We're going to focus on a lot of foundational content to help you move forward in your business, get more clients, make more money, and avoid expensive mistakes. You can sign up for that conference at lnc.tips/February 2025 virtual. I would love to see you there. Now, let's get on to the show. Welcome to the Legal Nurse Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that affects you, and I'm talking to you, and that is the concept of maintaining your health. None of us get a pass on this. And I have brought to you an expert in the area of healthy eating and healthy living, Kris Mew, who is a legal nurse consultant. She has experience in critical care nursing and public health nursing, and she serves attorneys primarily in the area of personal injury cases, observing defense medical exams, has worked in a law firm in the San Francisco area, and is an independent legal nurse consultant. Kris is also part of my LNC Success community, and I've gotten to know her over the last 3-4 years, Kris. I think it's been at least
4 years.
4 years. Welcome to the show, Kris.
Thank you for that introduction, Pat, and hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here.
Let's start off with some understanding of definitions, which is, what is healthy eating?
Well, Pat, that's a very broad statement that encompasses so much these days. And it started with my own personal journey of delving into what is healthy eating, because I thought I was doing a good job until I just wasn't seeing things change on the scale. My waist sizes weren't changing. And so I started to delve into what healthy eating actually is. And as an LNC, I pride myself on being a really solid issue spotter in the medical records aspects. I call myself a detective. Every case is different and every body is different. And in individuals, we look for root causes for things that are going wrong with us. And in cases, we look for different factors. And so I started wondering, what was all that? And I started delving into functional medicine to try to find out what those root causes meant. And the more that I explored, the further that I got diving into it and started realizing there's a whole understanding of what healthy eating actually means. I started to see improvements in my biological age. And I know some may think, what do you mean by that? Well, my insides are doing a slower aging process than my chronological age. And you might not understand what that means, but you have to do blood tests and other things to understand that. But I wanted to try to understand what that meant. And I was always taught in the food pyramid that we were supposed to eat throughout the pyramid and minimize our fat intake and low carbohydrates. Well, by doing so, we were actually adding to more inflammation in the body because some of those foods are processed foods. And the goal should be to decrease the inflammation within our own body. So by eating healthy, it is helping slow that process. So for me, it just means choosing foods that come as whole as possible in their state, as far as an avocado or tomato is a tomato. They don't have food labels on them. So I started becoming a detective and started delving into functional medicine, looking at the root causes of diseases. And then I started understanding the correlations between what those factors meant. Food in its real form doesn't come with a label, and it usually has no ingredients that you have to look at. It usually has a higher fiber content, which helps our gut's microbiome. Our insides need fiber to be healthy. So there's over 70% of our immune system that resides in our gut. So focusing on that is truly where we can get to helping ourselves.
And what I heard you say in terms of how this makes a difference in your health, I'll name a couple of things that I heard you say, but I'm sure there are others. You talked about slowing down the aging of your organs. You talked about reducing inflammation. We certainly know that obesity and diabetes and heart disease are all tied together. Is there anything else that we could look at as why should we eat more healthy? It certainly has some advantages that I'm sure you haven't touched on yet.
No, and I'm going to just scratch the surface on so many aspects of the topic that we're talking about today, Pat, because the overall goal is to try to minimize or avoid our top contenders of what we get when we age or throughout the whole process of living. We don't want to have to be combating diabetes, obesity, heart disease, which are some of our top #1 health issues in the US and the world because of the availability of processed foods and the conveniences that we've come to know and like. So it's focusing on trying to make ourselves as healthy as possible to help minimize these disease processes.
You know, as we think back on how people ate 100 years ago or more, when farms were more prevalent, and there were many more small mom and pop farms than there are big conglomerates. Our diets have certainly changed dramatically.
Yes.
I have the privilege when I'm living in New Jersey during the summertime of being in a rural area where I can drive by food stands. I described this once to my favorite attorney, and he said, "What do you mean it's on the honor system?" I said, "Well, there's a table and there's food on it and there's a box, and you leave in the amount of money to equal the food that you're purchasing from the farmer. And the money just sits there." Well, now they chain it to the table, so it's not something that you can remove. I have the privilege of living in an area where the farms are all around us, but very few people do. If we look at the country as a whole, or if we look at urbanized areas in other countries, how did we get away from eating food from the farm to going into the middle of the grocery store, literally the grocery store middle, away from the aisles, and finding all of these processed foods?
Well, that's a great point, Pat. And I think it boils down to a word: convenience. Whether it's logistics or whether it's time, we don't have the same amount of time that some of our parents and grandparents might have had to be able to cook a home cooked meal. Plus, there's an abundance of food that's available in as you say, the middle sections of the grocery stores, which are some of the most unhealthy parts of the store. The perimeters or the outsides of the stores are where we should mainly be shopping from, and including some of the staples that we need in the inside corridors. But we both know that if you go to any Costco's or Walmart's or big box stores, that people are loaded up with all kinds of things that would normally had come from the inside portions of our grocery stores. So going all the way back, humans have tried food processing and making things more convenient, from cleaning and storing and smoking and pickling and drying and fermenting, to name a few, way back to the Stone Ages, that we've been trying to do things to our foods for convenience. But we learned that around the 1920s or so, Louis Pasteur came up with canning and pasteurization, and he was looking towards removing and eliminating pathogens and spoilage that were harming our health. And then we've come along through the 1920s and we introduced frozen foods. And then decades and decades went on, and conveniences and additives and frozen foods and everything just increased the shelf lives and made it more convenient for us. So it's kind of coming back full circle. We're realizing that we need to get back to basics and start treating our health as wealth, because without that, we can't do anything for ourselves going forward and aging biologically healthy, as well as what we can bring to the table for attorneys and others that we're working for in the healthcare industry.
I know that the shift in the way that you view this has taken over a number of months or even years to come to the realization that you wanted to make changes in your own diet. And you talked about not being able to lose weight and not feeling fit. Tell us a little bit more for those of us who have not yet embraced this concept, because some of us may be saying, I like my Twinkies and I want to eat my ice cream, and it's so much more convenient to walk into the kitchen and open up the freezer and take out a box and heat it in 3 to 4 minutes for my lunch, rather than to make a meal from scratch. I have this discussion, by the way, with my husband all the time, who has to restrict his sodium, and I cook food without sodium and freeze it in portions for a meal, and then he goes and grabs the box instead of the food that I made. So I have not overcome this battle in my own household yet.
Of course,
what about you?
It again, it's convenience. And with all those convenient foods and the choice that, as you say, your husband reaches towards, it's taste. There's a lot of salt that's in processed foods. There's a lot of additives that, if you can't pronounce it, why in the world would you be putting it into your body if you don't understand what the heck that ingredient is? There's emulsifiers and gums and so many things. I'm not an expert in that field, and there's many people in this industry that know so much more and can explain that adds to taste and shelf life. But for me, it was just, I thought I was eating good. I've always been a lifelong exerciser. I have always been on sports teams when I was young. I've played many things throughout my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. I'm now in another decade, and I continue to be active and healthy. But I never could figure out why I thought I was eating right. My numbers weren't right, as far as like my cholesterol, for instance. When I started doing this deep dive into how I actually could make some positive changes and getting to the root whys, I started looking at, wait a minute, I am actually eating a lot more sugar than I realized. And I started just continuing to go deeper and deeper in the understanding of where all those hidden sugars are located. Some of the culprits were in my coffee. Sugary coffee creamers that I didn't realize were added. That starts off the day with an insulin spike. And I started learning that with insulin spikes, obesity follows. So insulin drives the obesity, and I just couldn't wrap my head around that. And after I started doing this process of really focusing on added sugars, that was my first thing. I realized that I did have a whole lot in my diet than I noted before. And the juices and all the quick insulin release things, the white processed foods, flours, things like that, that were for me shooting my sugar levels up, were some of my triggers. After I started incorporating some of these concepts, I did a cholesterol panel and noticed that my triglycerides had dropped from high 100s to 77.
Hmm.
And that is a direct correlation with our carbohydrate intake. So it kind of was a aha moment for me that, oh, this stuff actually does work.
Are you interested in getting more clients? Are you interested in building your business? Are you interested in knowing how to manage your business so that you can present yourself in the most attractive light? Are you interested in attracting new attorney clients who are drawn to you because of the knowledge that you possess? All of those goals help you build your business, and all of those interests are ones that we address in our next online conference, taking place February 27, 28, and March 1st, 2025. You'll find all the information that you need about this conference at the link lnc.tips/February 2025 virtual. I know that many of us are conditioned to think in terms of sugar is comfort, food is comfort. I know that many of us head into the kitchen when dealing with stress or frustration or anger or disappointment or sadness. Substitute any emotion that you want into that sentence. How do we overcome that conditioned reflex?
Great question, Pat. Time and practice, and just slow baby steps. Because once you start getting your body off of sugar, it's whenever we have an intake of sugar, it actually lights up our brain and sends a comfort thank you. It's like a stimulus, it's a constant stimulus. And once you start sabotaging your own body with that response of sugar all the time, and I mean like added sugars, we're not going to avoid it totally, nor should we. But added sugars and things that we know are harmful to our body, the body will reset in time and will stop craving those sugary things. But it's a process, and it's finding what works for you. I mean, taking a walk or getting out, doing something at that time and that moment when that strikes is helpful. I can remember when I was working in the ICU way back when, it was so stressful. I would come home and find myself staring into my cupboard, searching for starchy crackers or something. And I just didn't even understand why I was doing that. Well, it was being driven by the stress and cortisol, which is another factor. So it's difficult, but it's just a process. It's a lifelong journey. It's not a quick fix. It's something that you may have a good day or you may really blow it. But the more metabolically stabilized you get and the more resilient that you allow your body to become, you can have those off days and not even worry about it, as you should. We have to live. So I'm super passionate about it because I see that we can make changes by what we put into our bodies, and it has a very positive effect on ourselves and those around us.
You know, you made me remember a social worker that I worked with in the hospital who said something that stuck with me. She said, you know, my way of dealing with stress is to put a piece of candy in my mouth. I'm just like a little kid. Sugar, happiness. She said, I had to stop and look at that, how much sugar I was consuming by handling my stress with candy instead of healthier alternatives.
Yes. I'm a victim of that as well. I mean, I've had times when I would have candy jars sitting out on the tables during the holidays and different things, and I don't have the willpower to avoid that in the past, but I do now. I could have it out there now, and I know it's not good for me. So I go for that once in a while, and I go for a dark chocolate or something, or I go for that cheesecake that I know is loaded with some good fats. And I know people may be cringing by what I just said there, fat, but it's true. It's just the body needs to process differently than all those quick release sugars.
When I was exhibiting at attorney conferences, we had M&Ms created with the name of our company and our phone number. The Marsh, no, it's not Marsh, it's the Mars Candy Company is located in New Jersey. It's headquartered, and they will make any kind of specialty custom printed M&Ms that you want for a price. And I had a secretary who was addicted to M&Ms. And what we all began to realize is that our supply of M&Ms between exhibiting was slowly dropping. We kept it in the basement, that bag of M&Ms, but then she found reasons for going down to the basement and going to visit the M&Ms, and then other people were visiting the M&Ms. And before you knew it, we had nothing left to hand over to attorneys. Having it there as a presence, looking at it, saying to you, hey, Kris, I'm here.
Yes.
Pay attention to me. That's what ice cream would do if I had it in the freezer. It would say, Pat, come on, I'm here. You're there. It's time for us to meet.
Exactly. And that's such a great point, Pat, because I just don't buy my trigger foods, as I call them. I just, once in a while, I will definitely allow myself to have them, but I just don't on a regular basis have those. I love ice cream as well. But if I had it in here, I'd be creeping in that freezer going, ooh, even though I do incorporate all these things these days, it's just a trigger food for me. So that's another thing. It's individual, we all have to find what works for us, because what works for me may not work for others. And that's where you just take this information and find out what is best suited for your own needs and health.
There's a group of people who are wearing continuous glucose monitors who are not necessarily diabetic. Tell us about how that technology can be used in our quest for healthy eating.
That's a fabulous concept, and one that I've actually tried myself, and I am not a diabetic, but it is a fabulous tool. It not only gives you a minute by minute response to the food that you've eaten, but it also responds to how your body responds to stress or lack of sleep. Because I actually went through a metabolic wellness program myself that was given by Sutter Health out here in California and throughout different parts of the United States. And it was taught by Dr. Sinha, and he gave some fabulous examples, and then I was able to understand it in real-time numbers. It helps give us estimates, or people may have heard what a hemoglobin A1C or an average of a blood glucose is. It will give you how you respond to different foods. So, okay, how do I respond to eating some ice cream? You can see it right there on the gauge, and it's such a wonderful tool for people to be able to gather information. A lot of people are technologically savvy. They have the phones, you attach it to the back of your arm, and it gives you immediate response, which people like these days, to how you're reacting to certain foods that you eat.
Now, we talked about monitoring blood sugar. We talked about not having trigger foods, not automatically associating eating with sugar and stress together. What about other ways that we can improve our health?
Well, we cannot forget sleep. Sleep is when our bodies need time to rest and repair. And it is so important. And there are new studies out that are showing it's significantly important for our overall well being. Uh, Taking mini breaks can help us. Go outside if you happen to be working on a case or some frustrating event happens. Go outside, take your dog for a walk. If you don't have a dog, go just move your body. Call a friend. There are wearable devices these days, like an Apple iWatch or watch that I have and use, and it sends you triggers and cues when to get up and when to stand and move. And just my husband and I have recently incorporated taking a walk after dinner. There's studies that show even just a 5-minute walk after each meal that you eat can help metabolize your blood sugar and reset your mind. It'll kind of take you away from what's actually going on in your particular cases. I also practice yoga
Mm-hmm.
um, and movement, which incorporates another healthy thing, which is breathing exercises. It stimulates what's called our vagus nerve and can help lower our blood pressure and just reset our minds so that we're more aware of what's going on and we can handle different situations with ease and open-mindedness.
Those are fabulous strategies, Kris. I know that our listeners are going to want to know more about this topic. Tell us about a chapter that you recently wrote on this topic.
Well, I recently become the privilege of writing in a second version, my second version, your volume 3 of medical records analysis, and I wrote a chapter, Staying Healthy While Working on Cases, and I go through explaining some of the topics that we have talked in brief about today. But, one of the takeaways that I did mention is the greatest wealth is our health. That's a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And, I struggle with this all the time. It's something that's a process. We're human. So I give you some tips on how to handle things and what tools and devices are available to us.
And for those who would like to connect with you and find out more about you and your services, what would be the best way for them to reach you?
I can be reached by email. My last name, Mew, KMRN Consulting @gmail.com.
Okay. And then again, just completely repeat that, please.
It's mew.kmrnconsulting@gmail.com.
All right. Perfect. Kris, thank you so much. You have inspired me to walk into the kitchen and put away all those little snack packages of crackers, nuts, Belvita cookies, ginger orange cookies, biscotti that are sitting in big bowls just waiting for attention. There are farm workers in our area, and we have a way of donating food to those workers. And I'm thinking I'm going to scoop everything up and get it out of the house.
Get rid of those triggers, huh, Pat? It's hard. It's constant. We have to become aware of it, as I think I've made you become aware.
Yes, you have.
That's the first start to make a change.
Thank you so much for being a guest on Legal Nurse Podcast. Stay tuned for a few more minutes to find out who is coming up next on our show. We also recommend that you go to legalnursebusiness.com and check out the free reports that we offer and the products that we have to help you grow your legal nurse consulting business. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Pat, for the opportunity today.
Coming up next on Legal Nurse Podcast, you'll have an opportunity to hear from a nurse who works in one of the more demanding aspects of legal nurse consulting, and that is forensic nursing. Janelle Lee is a forensic nurse and also a person with extensive acute care experience. And she is our next podcast guest. Janelle, I'm going to ask you, for our listener, please give us an idea about some of the topics that you cover in your podcast.
Well, we discuss forensic nursing, what it is, how it relates to nursing practice, different types of certifications and education that's available out there, and different cases that I gave you an example of a case that I recently had, and how forensic nursing relates to those cases that we see as nurses on a general basis.
You'll get a lot out of Janelle's podcast. It's always fascinating to me personally, since I love to read crime novels, to think about how the analytical skills of a healthcare provider can impact the decisions that are part of the criminal justice system. With some people who are caught up unnecessarily and erroneously in the system, and others where the forensic details serve to prove their guilt. So stay tuned for the next podcast with Janelle Lee. And thank you for being a participant in this wonderful program that we have of Legal Nurse Podcast. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Pat.
That's it for Legal Nurse Podcast. Thanks for being here. Be sure to get your ticket for our next online conference that's taking place February 27, 28, and March 1. You can get your ticket at the link in this video if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're listening to this, the link is lnc.tips/February 2025 virtual. Come on and join us. Get knowledge, get support, get encouragement, make new friends, all from the comfort of your home. We'll see you there.